Summary of Evicted by Matthew Desmond. In 2008, Arlene Bell and her boys Jory and Jafaris are kicked out of their apartment on a cold January day. They move into a homeless shelter called The Lodge and then into a house on Milwaukee's north side, where most of the people are black, until they are kicked out again. After a few more moves, Arlene, the boys, and Sharena Tarver, a black woman who owns the apartment, find a place to live. Evicted tells the story of how evictions are so common in the United States through the eyes of 8 families in Milwaukee. Sharena was a teacher before she became a manager. She and her husband, Quentin, run their business together. Lamar is a single father of 2 boys who does not have legs. He is one of her renters. He is having a disagreement with Sharena about work he did for her, but she won't pay him what he deserves. Patrice Hingston, a young mother, used to live in the apartment above Lamar, but she was kicked out and now lives downstairs with her mother, Doreen, and her younger brothers. College Mobile Home Park is owned by Tobin Charney and operated by Lenny Lawson and Susie Dunn, who is known as Office Susie. It is on the poor, mostly white south side of Milwaukee. In May 2008, Tobin was close to losing the park when the city council didn't renew his license. The people who lived in the trailer park gathered behind him because they didn't want to be forced to move to the north side. Lorraine, one of Tobin's renters, might be kicked out because she hasn't paid her rent. Tobin's license is finally renewed, but only if he cleans up the trailer park, so he starts kicking people out right away. A notice to leave is sent to Pam and Ned, a crack-addicted pair. Pam is pregnant, and 2 of her girls are the only black kids in the trailer park. She and Ned have 2 more daughters. The family moves in briefly with Scott and Teddy, a former nurse and heroin addict in their late 30s. Arlene, Jory, and Jafaris get a cat. Arlene stayed in public housing when she was 19, but she was persuaded to move to the private market instead. Now, she has little chance of getting into public housing again. 75% of people who should get help with living don't get anything. Above Arlene, a woman called Trisha moves in. Patrice was kicked out of her apartment because Sharena wouldn't fix the things that were broken and Patrice wouldn't pay half of her rent. Sharena won't call a plumber herself, so Doreen takes $150 out of her rent to pay for one. Sharena also gives Doreen a notice to leave. Scott used to be a nurse, but he lost his license when he was caught stealing opioids and getting high at work. Lenny, Office Susie, and Tobin all have to go to a landlord training program together because the court made them. Teddy goes back to Tennessee, and Scott starts working with a group that cleans out homes that have been taken over by banks. Arlene is removed. Sharena is surprised to see Arlene at the courts for her hearing since most people who are being kicked out of their homes don't show up. Lorraine tries hard to find ways to stop being kicked out. Since her husband Glenn died of an overdose, she has felt like her life is stuck in a rut of hopelessness and unhappiness. Megan, one of Lorraine's daughters, doesn't talk to her anymore. Jamie, the other daughter, says she will give Lorraine some of the money from the check she gets from Arby's. Reuben, Lorraine's richer brother, agrees to pay her late rent, but Tobin says no. Beaker, Lorraine's brother, is in the hospital, so she moves into the trailer he owns. Sharena and Quentin hire groups of drug users, called hypes, to do work for them in exchange for small amounts of money. Sharena is looking for a new renter. LaDonna, who has a housing voucher, is interested in moving in. She plans to rent LaDonna a room in a house she just bought. She's happy because she can rent it out for more than the market price. Sharena has also started doing rent-to-own deals, which help renters with good credit build it up so they can buy homes. Doreen makes a deal with Sharena so that she doesn't have to move out. A young woman named Crystal Mayberry is coming into Arlene's apartment. She agrees to let Arlene and the boys stay with her after they are kicked out while they look for a new place to live. Crystal grew up in foster care and has a number of mental health issues. Arlene and Crystal keep living together, even though they fight a lot. Scott moves in with DP, who is the nephew of a Narcotics Anonymous friend. Scott tries to check himself into rehab after he loses his keys, gets fired, and loses his power all in the same week. But there are a lot of people at the rehab center, so he doesn't get in. Instead, he goes on a 3-day bender. Arlene and Crystal hear Trisha's boyfriend Chris beating her up upstairs, so Crystal calls the police. Sharena is then told off by the police for the nuisance activities going on her land. Sharena gives Crystal and Arlene a notice to leave and sends it to the cops. Arlene starts to look for a new place to live once more. Kamala, a young mother who moved in above Lamar, is playing cards at Lamar's apartment when her own apartment catches fire. Her 2 oldest girls are able to get away, but her 8-month-old baby dies. Sharena is glad to hear that she will not be held responsible as Kamala's landlord, even though she can't remember if she put smoke detectors in every room of the unit. Arlene still can't find a new place to live. Lorraine gets her food stamps back after they were taken away, and she spends a whole month's worth on a fancy lobster dinner she eats by herself to celebrate her and Glenn's anniversary. Lorraine knows that spending on luxury items now and then won't change her financial situation in the long run. She will always be poor, so she decides to treat herself now and then. While looking for a new place to live, Ned and Pam stay in a hotel and with a friend of Ned's. Landlords tell them over and over again that they won't take children. Arlene goes to see her cousin JP, who lives with her drug dealer son Boozy, with whom she shares a house. After Ned pretends to be a single father, Pam and Ned are finally able to get a unit. Crystal moves into the lodge after being kicked out of her apartment. There, she makes friends with Vanetta Evans, a 20-year-old mother of 3. Crystal and Vanetta agree to look for an apartment together. But Crystal is kicked out of the lodge after she hits a worker there. She has to go to her priest for help. Minister Barber gets a couple of older people for Crystal to stay with, but after one night, they kick her out. Sharena buys 2 new flats with the money from the insurance on Kamala's unit. Natasha, Doreen's daughter, has a son. He is named Malik Jr. Vanetta, and her kids stay with Ebony, who is Vanetta's sister. Vanetta is found guilty of a robbery she did when she was very poor and given 81 months in jail. After her SSI is cut off, Crystal starts sleeping on the street and turns to sex work. Now that Scott is clean again, he gets a job at the Serenity Club, which is an AA bar. 3 weeks into the job, he and DP are kicked out, and he moves in with AA members David and Anna. Scott has a setback and is sent home right away. Eventually, he goes home and asks his mother for $150 so he can start taking methadone. He moves into the guest house, which is a shelter for poor people. Eventually, he gets a job there as a resident manager. After a year, Scott gets help with living, which lets him get a job downtown and pay only a small amount of rent each month. Arlene and the boys move into a new North Side apartment. Her nephew shoots and kills T, a family member of hers. She gets kicked out of her new apartment and moves in with Trisha, who also works as a prostitute. Sonny, Trisha's boyfriend, moves in with his parents and sister. Sonny's parents also move into Trisha's 1-bedroom apartment. In the end, everyone has to move. Soon, Jory will move in with his dad, and Child Protective Services will send Jafaris to live with Arlene's sister. Arlene takes money from her Aunt Merva and gets her power back on, which lets her get the boys back. In the epilogue, Desmond talks about how important home is to a person's health and sense of self. People can make their lives better when they have a safe place to live. On the other hand, housing instability and eviction keep people in a cycle of poverty and lack. It is very important, then, that housing be seen as a human right. America was built on the idea that everyone has the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which includes the right to housing. Without a stable place to live, none of these other rights can be exercised. Desmond says that the housing voucher system should be made bigger so that all people with incomes in the bottom 30% could get one. The number of people who are kicked out of their homes would drop, and almost no one would be homeless. For the program to be reasonable, it would also be important to make it illegal to treat people with vouchers badly and to keep rents stable. In the last part of the book, Desmond talks about how he grew up in a poor home where the gas was sometimes turned off. Desmond's childhood house was taken over by the bank while he was in college. At this point, he started working for Habitat for Humanity. After he graduated, he went back to school to get a PhD in sociology to learn more about poverty. In May 2008, Desmond moved into Tobin's trailer park. In June 2009, he moved to the north side of Milwaukee. He lived with his subjects, wrote down almost everything they said, and tried not to get in their way as much as possible. When he saw how much his people were suffering, he felt guilty and sad. He thinks that what he found in Milwaukee is true for most, if not all, cities in America. During the course of his investigation, Desmond was moved by the thoughtfulness and compassion of the people he was studying.
About the author. Matthew Desmond went to Arizona State University for his BS in Media and Justice Studies and to the University of Wisconsin-Madison for his PhD in sociology. His first book came out in 2008 and was called On the Fireline: Living and Dying with Wildland Firefighters. He also wrote 2 books with his doctoral professor, Mustafa Emirbayer, about the sociology of race. The book Evicted, Poverty and Profit in the American City came out in 2016, and it made Desmond famous all over the world. The book won the 2017 Pulitzer Prize for Nonfiction, the 2016 National Book Critics Circle Award, and the 2017 PN/John Kenneth Galbraith Award. Desmond also got a Genius Grant from MacArthur in 2015. Desmond is a sociology professor at Princeton University. Before that, he was a professor in the sociology school at Harvard.
Hope we summarized it fully and you liked it. Please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel so that we are motivated to create more videos.